Welcome back everyone to our next presentation. I'm really happy to introduce to you Dr. Clemens Pues from PreZero, and he is one of the leading experts on plastic packaging recycling, with PreZero being a waste management company, not only in collection but also in recycling, and so he can tell us all about the whole value chain. He is in the field for over 27 years, has been in the US, has been a speaker here at EREC for the last 2 times, and I'm really happy to hear all about it. He told me already what he's showing us today is an internal study they conducted, internal information that he says probably is not out there, there's nothing out there like it. So I'm really happy to hear about that. Clemens, nice to have you. Have fun and let's go.
Yeah, thank you very much. And after such an introduction, I better don't say anything anymore because it only can go worse. No. Thank you very much, Mr. Bott. What I would like to make my presentation about is maybe something which sounds at first maybe a little boring or old-fashioned, namely the question about collection of packaging waste or collection of waste in general. And this is certainly nothing which usually would get a lot of attention. However, fortunately, I found a little example from a local newspaper, from an article from about 2 weeks ago, which was published there right before our national election we just had. And this in this little town in Greven, there's at the moment a discussion about changing the collection system with packaging system. And this article basically explained that this question of changing the collection system for packaging waste attracted more attention in social media than the national election. And of course, this to some extent shows that we are probably talking about something which may be a little bit more emotional than it looks like if you start to have discussions about it. And that's what I basically want to talk about today, namely the question what the role of collection is in the whole value chain. And what I would like to show you is a little bit about a study we conducted internally, to have an understanding what's going on in these markets. And I will show you some excerpts about this in a moment. However, who is PreZero? You may not have heard about us. We are a waste management company and part of the Schwarz Group. We at the moment have 13,000 colleagues in our company. We're active in 9 countries, especially in Western Europe, plus Poland, plus a little bit in the United States. There we have plastic recycling activities just started. That's basically what we're doing there. And I'm basically working for a division which operates sorting plants for packaging waste. At the moment, we have 5 plants working and 2 under construction, 1 in Zwolle and 1 in the area of Munich. We have glass recycling facilities, 2 in Germany, 1 in Poland. So we're not just doing lightweight packaging, meaning films, etc. But at the same time, we have some recycling activities in our group. We have in our immediate division 2 activities for post-industrial plastics, but we have what I'm going to show you in a minute, activities in post-consumer plastics as well, like for instance in Hamburg in Austria and Fonte in Italy, where we have 2 recycling plants which process post-consumer polyolefins and polystyrol with a capacity of about 40,000 to 60,000 tons. We're just planning a new and constructing a new facility in Grünstadt in Germany with a joint venture partner, where we want to start next year in the first quarter. And on the right, you can see our activities in the United States, again, roughly with a capacity of around 40,000 tons, where we take, for instance, LDPE films as well. And at the moment, we are growing into other areas as well. What is closed loop recycling? What is the role of collection and recycling? Usually, when you operate either as recycling company or producer or retailer or primary raw material processor, you normally have a certain role in the whole value chain, which gives you an environment of competition of other retailers or other waste management companies, etc., which you're used to, which work under similar business models, which work under similar planning cycles, etc., and something which you usually know. When you go into the area of trying to fulfill all the requirements which are now posed upon retailers, producers, and of course everybody else in the value chain to achieve the environmental targets which we have to achieve in order to change climate and do all the necessary things, you start to have to work, we basically have to start to work together with other partners in the value chain which you maybe not that familiar with, which have other business models, other decision structures, and which, if you just try to solve all the issues around recycling from your individual perspective, you may have immediately a problem what to do. And the approach we are taking in our group for this is that we try to have presence and experience on all steps of this value chain, which doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do this all on our own, that there's the idea that we have exactly our packaging back into our packaging which we're going to produce tomorrow. But the idea that, of course, if you have a presence on these different steps of the value chain, you are able to understand what's happening, you understand the business model, and then you are easier able to achieve those objectives. Like, for instance, if you have to use recyclates in your new packaging again or in your other products, then it's not necessary to have the old packaging back, the exact packaging, but maybe on a regular basis a certain amount of material which then is from the same polymer structure or something to have it back in your cycle. And that's basically what we try to do based on our activity, of course, in the retail sector, and of course now with the activities of the PreZero. What we do in this study, I can and cannot, of course, go into too many details about this. And it was a very, very large study. What we did is try to get understanding what's going on in Europe in plastics for the next years. And we basically focused on all Europe, including EU and EFTA. And we took a look at the usage of packaging. We took a look at the different collection systems we have in place, including what's going to happen with deposit systems, where maybe certain types of packaging are exempt from a separate collection. This is the case in some countries. What's about littering? It's important as well. We took a look at the sorting side, which I'm not going to talk in detail today, but we try to understand how the infrastructure of sorting is today and maybe develop in the future. And as an indicator to see whether we were able to reach our targets, we basically try to see how the European targets based on a country by country basis given by the European Union. What is the role of collection? Or what do we have to do when you know what's happening in collection in this cycle? You basically only need to know three things. One thing is, how is the collection structured in a country today? This is an example of Germany. We, in all countries, have curbside and brings systems for packaging waste with different features. In Germany at the moment, we still have a large role of bag collection systems for packaging waste, while we expect that bin collection systems will increase and that by the end of the century, by the end of the 20s, we will have predominantly bin collection systems. There are some things which we don't have in Germany, like for instance, multi-chamber bins or compulsory commingled system, which you also can find in other countries, for instance, multi-chamber systems and street collection systems in Sweden, for instance. So this naturally gives 100% as a sum, or should, if you make a business model. Then you have to know how much of your target items you're going to capture in these different systems. And our experience is that with bag collections, you usually are not able to collect as much packaging, especially plastic packaging or the other types of packaging, as in bin collection systems. While of course, if you don't have a separate collection at all, that's the example of commingled waste, then you usually collect everything. And our assumption was that littering is already taken out before. So this has to be 100%, but we have the littering figures estimated as well. And that of course in bin systems, for instance, you have a little less material, your target material collected, because maybe people are a little hesitant to go a long way down the road, or go even further if they have to go to a collection station further away, and that you then have different things. And if you basically at the same time then add or multiply the amount of efficiency of these systems, capturing and the distribution, you come to the conclusion that at the moment in Germany, you only collect about 79, 80% of your packaging waste, while 20% are going to residue bins, which is a high number. The figures in Europe will be higher even, I show in a moment. And this basically corresponds to figures which we have from residue analysis and from other sources. So these figures are more or less verified. And by the way, we didn't assume in our model that there will be too many changes in the efficiency going forward. You will see in a moment that this will be necessary. The next thing, of course, is the question how much unwanted items you collect in your collection system. This is a little bit inverse to what we just said about capturing plastics. In bag systems, you usually don't have that many residues or unwanted items. It's not necessarily residue in the classical sense, but this is sometimes fairly good material with not that much plastic as it could be, but with not that much residues, while other bin collection systems rather tend to have more residues in there. At the same time, and of course, if you are forced to go a long way and drive to a municipal collection station, the assumption is that you only bring what you wanted to bring them, because you're afraid that they maybe want to take it. So that's something what you then can have need as a basis in order to evaluate your collection system. So in terms of what you collect and what you don't want, which things you collect and you don't want to collect, because this is then eventually entering in the collection systems. Combining this with what is used by consumers in Europe, this is now European figures. You can see that our assumption at the moment is that there will be a reduction in plastic packaging consumption in Europe for different reasons. Like, for instance, that there's a substitution effect where plastic is substituted by other types of packaging, and a whole range of other factors that packaging may become of less weight, the weight will be lowered, and etc., etc. And another important factor we expect is that there will be an increase in deposit systems. As you, for instance, who followed the newspapers today and yesterday, Austria just decided to implement a deposit system. That's something which you can see in most countries. So the separate collected volume for the household will go down if you take the deposit systems out. However, we expect that the collection of separate plastic will not go down that much, simply because we expect that there is an increased collection effort in some countries. And if you, for instance, go to Switzerland today, they don't have a separate collection system, and the expectation is that they going to introduce, and they're in the way of introducing a separate collection for plastic packaging, and that in countries where you don't have this implemented to the last house or to the last type of packaging, this will improve as well, so that overall, including some substitution effects, the amount of packaging for the sorting plants will stay the same. You will then calculate all over Europe what is collected and not collected. This is, to some extent, at least for us, was a surprising figure that we think at the moment about 40% of plastic packaging in all Europe. That's the European Union plus EFTA, so 30 countries. We may lose about 40%, which is a considerably high number. And the efforts we're going to see and the improvements until, I expect, until the end of the 30s is at the moment based on an increase in the density and the structure of the collection system, not necessarily a change in behavior of people, which would separately have to be modulated. And at the same time, you then can calculate how much plastics you're going to have out of your sorting plants, and this again, due to the increased collection efforts, will roughly stay the same. So what is now the impact on the question whether we can achieve our recycling quotas? That's simply to calculate by taking what you have out of the recycling sorting plants and take a look what this is made of, and you have separated polymers and films, and you have mixed plastics. And everybody who is a little bit in recycling knows that polymers and films are more easy to recycle, while mixed plastics is a problem. And what you can see all over Europe at the moment, the target of 2.7 million tons, which is required for mechanical recycling, can more or less easily be taken from polymers and films. While we still have a huge bunch of mixed plastics, which partly are today, of course, going to mechanical recycling, but can be used for energy recycling. Going forward with increasing recycling quotas, you immediately see that this has a substantial effect, since you have to go into recycling areas which recycle material from mixed plastics which you don't have to use today. And this is the reason why, of course, chemical recycling is becoming much more interesting, because the idea is that the oils and the products and recyclates coming out of chemical recycling can be used for higher applications, since at the moment there is no market for this amount of mixed plastics recyclates coming to the market. At the same time, we have a discussion about changing our way how to measure recycling. I don't want to go too much in the detail, but this basically means that we take the measuring point away from the sorting plant and bring it to the output of the recycler, which means that we will lose, just on making a different type of math, about up to 30% of our material, which is calculated to be recycling. If you then still take the same requirements from the quotas, you immediately see that there is a deficit going forward. If you simply take the figures as they are today. And of course, the idea is not to wait until we reach this deficit, but the question is, what can we do in order to avoid this? And this is based on this model, very easy things to recommend, but difficult to implement, of course. And this is, of course, that you need an increased collection effort to reach the recycling target and convince people to simply collect more of the desired plastics in the systems, and by either changing your collection system or giving incentives. At the same time, the question is, it's not only to have things you want in your collection system, but at the same time to try to keep things out of the collection system which you don't want. In some countries, there's a tendency to say, let's collect everything and then let's do sorting technology, the rest. But giving this material then to higher quality applications is a very challenge. And of course, you then would have to sort about 5 to 6 times the amount of volume which we are sorting today in Europe, which as a sorting company we like as an idea, but of course, which brings a lot of challenges to the non-existing infrastructure and what to do with this output, by the way. And unfortunately, there are only very few countries actively monitoring their collection systems today. Like, for instance, in Norway, which is, in my opinion, the best example we have, or I know, sorry, let's say it this way. And like in Belgium, where we have a long-standing tradition of cooperation between municipalities and the EPR systems to monitor this. And this, of course, helps to improve the quality of these products and to help with more high quality recycling and applications. And which is, by the way, with this question of changing measuring point, the changing measuring point of how to calculate quotas, a little even contradictory effect, because at the moment everybody's challenged to do more high quality recycling in order to find new applications for products. Which means that you have to sort out in your recycling process some things which you cannot use for these high quality recyclables. Which means that the more advanced the recycling gets, the lower the actual output of a recycler gets. If at the same time you change a measuring point, there may be an advantage for a recycler who has a product which allows a lot of impurities in the product compared to a recycler who only has high quality products. And that's something I think we have to watch out in order not to contradict ourselves with our targets. Yeah, that's about it. That's an example from Norway about how they do their collection. That's something I don't want to go into detail. And this is just an example about what is coming out of a recycling plant if you put certain types of input material in these recycling plants, for instance, polypropylene. The idea is that you have about 70% of material as good output of the recycling plant, while you lose some material simply to humidity, to other things like labels, organic things, and other types of plastics. And that even with film, for instance, 70% is a very good quota. So the figure I just used, the 30% loss, is not something which I would consider to be overly pessimistic, by the way. Yeah, that's about it. And I'm looking forward to questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clemens, for this presentation and for those insights into your study, into the study you conducted. Really interesting. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about, and I don't know if you have looked into it, that on the other side of it, because you told us now a lot about recycling and collection, but on the other hand, we have the demand for this second life material. And we are hearing already there's a growing need for that because a lot of people want to use recycled materials. Mm-hmm. Do you know anything about the development that we will see in that on that side?
Well, as a sorting and recycling company, of course, we hope for much demand and an increasing demand on this. And what we see, of course, is that more and more companies are really noticing that in order to change these processes long-term, their recipes in their either packaging or their products, and even if they start to think about food packaging with recyclates, that this is nothing which we can base on short-term planning, but this is something which needs a long-term planning. And this is something which is now starting to, from my observation, is starting to take place in a lot of companies, all types of companies, larger companies, smaller companies, packaging producers, etc. So it's on the one side, of course, the question where to get this material from, and of course at the same time the observation that people start to know that this is nothing which you can just start thinking about on a year-to-year basis, but in order to think about these cycles, you need a much longer perspective on this. Developing the recipe of a product or packaging sometimes takes years. And of course, if you do this, you want to know that this material, which you then need in 2 years, is available and that you have access to this. So there are several things going on at the same time. Yes, this is definitely for us interesting development, but of course challenging development, because that's something we have to prepare for.
Yeah. Are there other ways you are looking for to prepare for those challenges?
Yes, of course. I mean, like making presentations like this and making this situation aware. That's a large part of this. Of course, helping in discussions about changing collection systems, for instance. For us, it's important to know how to develop the infrastructure of sorting going forward, what types of recipes are required, what type of recycling systems are developing, how do our output of the sorting plants have to look like tomorrow and maybe in 5 years. And the point is, we will, of course, make an investment into a sorting plant. This is an investment which you normally make for 8 to 10 years. Yeah, you can change and adjust sorting technology, but you don't want to do this in the first year. So that's something you have to plan for. And then, of course, you have to really think what's going on in a few years if you want to make these decisions today on the recycling market and on the input structure as well.
Totally. Do you think this is something that could or should be politically controlled?
That's I have to switch to my politician hat and give a answer as a politician to be careful. I mean, what we definitively need is to keep the quotas up. And as you can see, the immediate effect of higher quotas is something which has an immediate impact on the structures in the market. And that what we of course need is first that we have these targets, and secondly that of course they are monitored and there's a strong implementation about it, because no system works if there is not strong monitoring of this at the same time. So this is certainly something for you can call it political or administrative aspect or implementation aspect based on which level of government this ever is going to have. But this is definitely necessary, especially with regards to the point that if these things are tough to implement, there may be an idea that the ideas how to get around it take place, and this is the reason why you need this implementation. On the other side, of course, yeah, things like national regulations or strong regulations for us as a waste management industry help. Just example from the recent past is the discussion about what we heard first had not as a European impact, but foreign impact put on us is the green fence strategy from China, which basically said that China didn't want to import anything, which is a kind of political decision. And it was not a market decision, it was a political impact. And of course, everybody said, okay, and struggled what to do. And for us, it was a big chance. We did not really were involved in these markets, but had the problem that, of course, the European recycling industry had to struggle with competitors in other countries, which simply had other cost structures and everything. So this for us was a challenge, and the green fence really helped and gave us a chance, based on something, a political decision, to develop our recycling infrastructure in Europe, which was there, but not there to an extent how we needed it at this point in time. So long answer to a short question, yeah, to some extent this helps and is necessary in order to make sure that these targets are taken serious. And as I showed you, if you make the projection of the ongoing processes and don't change anything, there is a gap. There's a definitive gap. And this gap is not just going to be closed by that nothing happens. And at this point in time, I think we need, to some extent, a political or regulative, maybe something I like better than political, a regulative approach to this to make sure that these things are adjusted. Because the point that we don't reach our recycling targets in 2030 is nothing which is written in stone. This is not something which is a safe thing. This is only going to happen if we don't change things. And that's for this, of course, we need some regulative and, if you need the word, political support.
For sure. Thank you for this answer at this point. If I may, I would like to stretch your mind even a little further out of the EU, because that's of course what we were talking about. But what comes into the discussion always is the question whether it's really the best thing right now to grow our recycling market in the EU even further, or to, on the other hand, maybe have a look on how to do basic waste management, basic recycling processes in other countries. This morning, for example, I talked to someone who is starting up a pilot project in Pakistan to build some recycling plants there and start even on a very basic level to create some circular economy there. And how do you think will that have to come into effect? What will we have to do globally? And what are maybe challenges we got there?
Yeah, man, this is the question of transport or shipment of waste. There is the discussion about that material shouldn't leave a country in order to make sure that things are worked out to understand it. And this is something which, to some extent, we have to expect that this will happen. This is a political discussion, so to that extent, this will happen. And we certainly will see this with just freshly collected material, which will, in a tendency, stay more and more in countries and be sorted there. And we see the development of an infrastructure in recycling, which we haven't seen in the past yet. This is just starting to develop. So this is a good thing. And of course, if you have an outlet in another country which works with other cost structures, you have a problem when you're just trying to develop your industry and it's not mature and you're faced with a competitor with other regulatives. So to that extent, putting restrictions on transport or shipment of waste is certainly a necessary thing. On the other side, if you just look into a European situation and just look at the volumes, what we have available out of sorting in some countries. We have certain volumes of certain polymers like polystyrol, or even in some smaller countries, polyethylene, polypropylene, PET, where it doesn't make sense to have a recycling plant in that country because the volume is simply too small in order to fill recycling plants with needs 40 to 60,000 tons to be efficient. So for this type of sorted products, there's certainly a need for transport or shipment. This will, I think, in the future take, of course, from a European perspective, take rather place in the European context. And this is simply easier with the European Union and the regulations, including EFTA. I think EFTA will be aligned according to the European EU regulations if you talk to these countries. So this will happen. So there is definitely, I think, the need to have this infrastructure in this context ready to be able to ship material from one country to another, to make recycling efficient and possible, because nobody will recycle 500 tons of polystyrol in a country when he's not allowed to do it. Then something else will happen with this material. So there is the need to ship it to another country. The question, of course, then going to third world countries is, of course, again, a political question, which has to be looked at different angles. What was the problem in the past with shipping this material to third world countries? It's not a necessity that there didn't something happen with this material. I mean, this material sometimes had positive value and was sold there, so the people were looking for this. And nobody bought material just to throw it on the beach. But they did something. But the difference sometimes was that what's happening with the residues and all the things which they don't need from the recycling process. And this in the past was a problem. So I think we can talk about transport or shipment of waste again, but under circumstances where we can be sure, and our customers can be sure, that this material will be treated under the same circumstances as we do it in Germany. This not only means trying to get the good things out, but trying to do something with the residues and the other unwanted items as well. And yeah, somebody in Pakistan, you mentioned, certainly he may need material from sorting plants from us because it's maybe a better quality than he can find in Pakistan. But on the other side, maybe this helps to develop this infrastructure in Pakistan as well. If there is somebody who can do it and there is the market for this, this always means that there may be an incentive for a collector to look for this material and to develop this. So trying just to make things too easy for him, I have to be a little careful what I'm saying, but making things too easy for him and say, let's get this material from another country doesn't help him to develop these problems in that country. So there may be, to some extent, incentives to do this internally. I've never been to Pakistan, but my perception is that, of course, that the overall infrastructure in those countries with regards to collection and capturing plastics in separate collection systems is there, instead of maybe having things in marine littering. So maybe to some extent, it helps to look that this infrastructure has a chance to develop in these countries. And then maybe at a later stage, develop further.
Perfect. Thank you.
Long answer.
Thank you for that answer as well. It's really interesting to see the different angles of that. And thank you already for your time. I've stretched it a little longer than we had in mind first, but thank you for the really interesting answers at this point. Do you have any last words for our participants here?
No, unfortunately, I can't see who's participating, so I would usually address this. But the point is, in this value chain, I'm just sure there is no important or less important part in this value chain. All these parts are absolutely important. And if you start just to stress things on one level, you may easily forget that in order to get this chain working, there are things necessary, like even the boring thing of collection. And collection, unfortunately, only gets attention when there's a change. If things are going, nobody's looking at this because it's low involvement, which is good. But this is something we have to take a look at, and it's not just about the new sorting technology. We need the whole value chain. Thank you very
exactly.
much.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Thanks to all of you for participating. It's really nice to have you here at EREC, and I hope to see you again tomorrow for our last day. We will start at 9 a.m. with our startup pitch, and hope to see you all again. Have a nice evening. Clemens, thank you. Nice evening to you too. And with that, I wish you a good night. Bye-bye, and see you soon.